said this occurred. Oh, no problem. And the man produces the calendar and he says, this is it. And the lawyer says, may I see the calendar? He says, may I approach the bench, Your Honor? And he goes up to the judge and he says, Judge, that date is a Saturday. Max Satinsky would not have been in the mill that day. He would have been in synagogue. The case was thrown out, of course.
I never knew that.
How do you like that?
And the other one was that Uncle Max's favorite brother was David. Unusual, close relationship, and his heart was broken when his brother David died. And he said the same thing twice, once when he lost a son, and once when his brother David died. He said, for me, the sun has gone down a little. Every Yom Kippur, my husband and I, Irwin and I, would take our 2 children over to Uncle Max to be blessed. And Uncle Max would stand in front of my son, David, who is named for his grandfather, and Uncle Max would put his hands on David's head, and the tears rolling down that beautiful face would give that blessing, especially because of the name he carried. And Irvin, I never forgot that. It was one of the most moving and touching things. Do you remember?
You don't remember?
Well, Pop blessed
He
us
was a
every
little
Yom
boy.
Kippur.
Yeah.
He maybe was 4 or 5 years
Individually,
old.
he would call us out from the dinner table, and each one separately. He blessed. Remember that.
Sure.
Well, it didn't help you when you slept.
I tried. I tried.
She still tried.
Uncle Max was a marvelous actor.
Oh, and a
Oh,
sense
wasn't
of
he that?
humor, second
Yeah,
to
yeah.
none.
He's a wonderful person. I never read a psychology book.
Never
about
could
his
have
life.
written them.
He never was drunk in his life, but one time he put an act on of being drunk with a friend of his, Mr. Weiss, the butcher man. And Mr. Weiss brought him home, he lay on the couch, and Aunt Molly came in all upset, and he opened his eye, never a wink when Weiss wasn't looking. He put on a perfect act of drunkenness. He also had marvelous satirical manners, you know, like the one he said, Rhea never would eat a hot meal. Rhea made a vow never to eat a hot meal. Which Rhea takes
was
a long
always
Now,
time.
one of the funniest stories is when Herb, or was it Joe? They were in Atlantic City,
Oh, the both of them, they
They
were
ran
together for a weekend.
and they
Did
ran
you see
short
what
of
happened as soon as I
money.
came, David?
Start?
Did you see what I told
Stories
you?
you can tell for hours.
What'd you say? What
No,
happened?
but this is a
Irv and
hysterical
Joe.
Yeah.
story.
Listen to this. Maybe.
Herb and Joe were down the shore.
Yeah.
They thought they'd stay an extra day or two, and they ran short of money.
Of course. They always, none of
The
them had
little
money.
background to that song, Irv and I.
Oh, but wait a minute.
Finish her
No,
story.
Helen.
Go ahead.
Let her
Wait,
tell
I
the
have a
story.
background to Helen's story.
No, it is.
This
It is.
goes,
The footnote is
The important part was of that story is
Never had
Irv and
a-
I
you
never
never-
had a cent. We spent our allowance immediately. Me
And then-
on candy and sweets and jewel, and Irv on
That's
selfie
allowed
girls.
Saturday and Tuesday. They
By
were-
Tuesday, I
And
had
then
no
she always
allowance.
borrowed from Rose's.
So I
Yes,
borrowed. So
she
this
was
is why it's
saying.
important.
So Irv and Joe were down the shore, and they run short of money. And they call Pop.
Please send money.
Please send money. Pop says, I won't send you a thing.
You were supposed
And
to
they,
go.
you were supposed to go for just so many days, and won't send you a thing. They received by wire money,
$16.
and he says, I didn't send it,
I
Helen
wouldn't give-
sent it.
Helen of all people who never had anything.
That's a gorgeous
That's why it was
story.
important to tell the
That's a
beginning.
gorgeous story.
Oh, that was.
I wouldn't send it, Helen
That's
sent it.
why it was so important to get that.
Then there was another story. When I was about 18, I tried smoking, and I liked it.
Yeah.
And I asked my father, speak to my mother. Could I smoke a cigarette in the house? My mother was very strict.
My father was.
So my father must have said to my mother, look, she's honest. She could do it behind our back.
That's true.
Let her do it. So my mother very grudgingly said, all right, 1 cigarette. Now it's a Seder at the Satinsky house. That Seder table only extended from the front door to the kitchen, about 40, 50 people.
I know. Bubby
And
did.
Uncle Max sitting like the patriarch that he was, up at the head, and then we were all graduated, and we young people were sitting down at this end. apparently the kind of holiday that it was, Uncle Max, you could smoke.
Wasn't a
So
Saturday.
when we finished eating, Uncle Max took out his case and he took a cigarette and he lit it. And I took a deep breath and I leaned over the whole length of this table and I said, Uncle Max, could I have a cigarette? The room quieted down. You couldn't.
We never spoke.
Hush. Never, never. Not a word. Uncle Max pushed back his chair, took the cigarette case out of his pocket, walked slowly, slowly down the table, and with a
Dramatically.
flourish, like Sir Oliver,
Yeah.
takes the case, hands me the cigarette, lights it
Oh
for me,
my goodness.
puts the cigarette case back, and walks back, and there isn't a sound in that room.
But he accomplished his purpose.
And she accomplished hers. She
There
spoke in
never
front
was
of
an
us.
actor who did a better job than he did that day. He was superb.
I will tell you, for a moment, we were in awe of Gertrude.
Nobody else would have had the nerve to do
Right.
that.
Well, we knew he did not want us to smoke in front of us, and we didn't. In front of him.
I have a story about your grandmother, David.
Oh, God.
When I was engaged at Jewel, he was invited by a friend of his from Dickinson College by the name of Mannion, I don't know if you remember the name, Mencken. And I'm meeting him for the first time. We're sitting there, and I was introduced, Helen Satinsky, and he said, not the Irish Belle's mother.
No.
Not the Irish Belle's mother? I said, yes. I said, did you know her? He said, his mother was a dressmaker, Mencken in Jewtown. My mother had all her clothes made there. And he said I remember she always wore big purple hats and purple powder boxes.
Be careful
and
the
purple
wire, honey.
clothes. And he said every time he knew she was coming for a fitting, he would hide behind the mirror. He thought she was so gorgeous. And he loved to hear her accent. She had a real brogue.
Well, she was born
So
in
it was quite a thrill, because I hadn't seen my mother. My mother died when I was so young. And
Well, this is a story for
She
the
was a
whole,
handsome woman.
for the
That's what-
reputation of the
Hey,
whole.
David, I thought you were done, for God's sakes. I tell one story and Gert, I opened
No,
up Gert.
This is the story to close because it's beautiful. When my sister died, she had owned an apartment that had to be sold. The lawyer called me up and he said, Gertrude, I know what a traumatic experience this will be for you. I will go and represent you at the settlement. And these are all the figures, and this is so and so and so on. And he went to the Commonwealth to represent me. Everything is fine. I had never met the man who bought the property. Never. To this day, I don't know him or his name. Everything is fine, and suddenly the man from Commonwealth says, oh, I'm terribly sorry, but there was one item that was overlooked. There's a $1,500 item that Mrs. Satinsky owes, because I was representing the sister. So the lawyer said, well, none of us caught that. And I have Mrs. Satinsky's check, but it doesn't include this item. We didn't know about it. The man from Commonwealth said, well, then in that case, we'll have to postpone the settlement, because all the money must be in. The man who bought the apartment turned to this Commonwealth representative and said, will you take my check for the $1,500? The man says, I don't know why I should take your check. You don't owe it. She owes it. He said, she'll pay me. She's a Satinsky, and that name is good enough for me. That's it.
I remember, you told us this. You told us that.
You know, I had such a lump in my throat.
Yes.
And I told that to all of my Satinsky grandchildren.
you know, my mother was
When I
not
was
only
at
beautiful.
David's, I said, this is
she
the
was-
name you carry.
She was considered not quite like the other Jewish women of the
Matt
neighborhood.
Cain
She
is
went
the
sledding
culture
with a hired board from the store to the scandal of the neighborhood, and she went roller skating, and no one could, all the Jewish really didn't understand that.
The summer of 1929, I was a counselor at a camp. There I met 3 Satinsky girls, Rose, Helen, and Rhea. We became very friendly, and we saw each other during the winter. We went to concerts together, went to the movies. And then I was going back the following summer, and my friend Rose said, come to dinner. I knew nothing about the family except these 3 girls. I went to their home, and as we sat down at the dinner table, this very tall, slim, very good-looking young man came in, and Rose said, this is my brother, Irv. tell me that he stood there staring, and he said, "Don't move, don't move, I'll be right down." And he came down, and then after dinner, he asked if he could take me home. We had a date for a few nights later. It was a very warm evening in the summer, and we took the ferry on the Delaware River to cool off. It was our first date, and he proposed to me. And that's not as surprising as the fact that I said yes. I said, "But we can't tell anybody because they'll think we're crazy. Nobody knows you." But little by little, as he came to the house and took me out, and my family got to know him, and then we were married. October 1929 was the crash. Everybody lost everything, but everything. But that didn't stop us. We got married. We did all the things we wanted to do with very limited funds. We saw every show in town, walking to the gallery and paying 75 cents. We heard every concert that we wanted to hear. We paid 50 cents walking up to the amphitheater. We went to a movie that was a quarter. And once in a while, when we felt as if we really could splurge, we had dinner out. And for 65 cents, we had a complete, what they called, blue plate special. It was a wonderful, happy, carefree time. And the fact that we had no money didn't in the least disturb us. Irv worked in the family mill. He graduated Penn, Wharton School, and he went into the mill, and from one end to the other, he learned textiles. He knew everything there was to know about that. And then he said to me, "Look, I would like to be in business for myself. Now's the time to do it." I was teaching, bringing in some money, not much, but some, and we had no children yet. So Irv left the family mill, and then the real problems presented themselves, the same aggravations. We had nothing. We didn't have a dollar. Nobody in the family had any money. Everybody had lost everything, and we had a little bit of money in a bank that never paid back a cent. But that didn't stop Irv. He went to New York, and he had a meeting with the man in New York who was the busiest, biggest, most successful man selling yarns, woolen yarns in the United States. And Irv said, "I would like very much to be your customer, but I need credit." And the man said, "Well, what are your assets?" He said, "Well, I only have one, my wife." "Do you own a house?" "No." "Do you own your car?" "No." "Do you have any money in the bank?" "No." "Well, why should I give you credit? You have absolutely no security." Now, this gentleman, Mr. Onish, was an extremely Orthodox Jew. And Irv said, "Well, I think, Mr. Onish, that you ought to give me credit because I say the best mofter in the United States." And Mr. Onish looked at him, this tall, slim, American young man, opened up his desk drawer and took out a prayer book and said, "All right, let's hear it. What mofter do you want to say?" Now, Irv's birthday was October 1st, and that is the beginning of the prayer book. And Irv said, "Oh, Mr. Onish, we should begin at the beginning." That was his mofter. He said a beautiful prayer. He had a lovely voice. He knew exactly what he was doing because he had had a very thorough Hebrew background in education. And when he finished the mofter, Mr. Onish said, "How much credit do you want?" And Irv was afraid to say anything. "Whatever you think." And Mr. Onish said, "Well, I was going to give you $1,000 just because you're a nice young man and you need help. But after what I've just heard, I'll give you $2,500. that's how we started. With $2,500 credit, complete and total stranger, Irv went to Philadelphia Textile School at night to learn the things he had not learned in the mill, and the rest is history. So many, many times he used to say, there are people who feel that a religious background is a waste of time, waste of energy, and you can be doing other things that are more important. That incident with the yarn was the first. The second, many years later, when we had a successful business, a customer of Irv's wanted a very large order of material woven. He was going to make skirts. But he wanted a certain pattern which was absolutely hideous. And Irv said, nobody's going to buy this, it's ugly. Never mind, that's what he wants. Irv wove the fabric, and 2 days before it was to be delivered, the man went bankrupt. And we are stuck with a $25,000 batch of material that nobody wanted. Irv said, let's get away, I have to think this out. We drove up to Grossinger's for the weekend. And as we walked into the dining room, the maitre d' said, there's a couple there that would like you to join them. The couple sitting there was an elderly couple. This was the biggest manufacturer of skirts in New York, which meant in those years the biggest in the country. He was a customer of Irv's. Irv used to say, in business, you can't whisper in New York and not have it heard in Los Angeles. And this gentleman knew all about the fix that we were in. And he said to Irv, what are you going to do with the goods? Throw it in the river? And Irv said, well, I'll think of something. And this gentleman said, I know what it cost you. It cost you $3 a yard, I'll give you one. And Irv said, well, it's hardly fair. Well, why should I give you more? Nobody wants it. Irv said, well, because I say a beautiful mafter. And this man said, was that so? I'll give you a proposition. Tomorrow morning, come down for the services. Grossinger's has a chapel, and every Saturday morning they have services. You say the mafter. If you say a better mafter than I do, send it in for your cost. But if I say a better mafter, send it in for $1. And Irv agreed. He borrowed a prayer book from the manager of the rest of the hotel, and for an hour he was rehearsing the mafter. In the morning, after shower, shaving, and dressing, he said, are you coming down? I said, not me. I'll wait. I went down a little later on, had a cup of coffee, and when the chapel door opened at noon and they walked out, I could tell from Irv's face that everything was all right. And this elderly gentleman said to me, your husband